Replacing RJ Harvey won't be easy, but what kind of role will Jaden Nixon play?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
UCF, your first listen of every day. For the first word from the last word on sports is my good friend Andrew Gluco, aka at Statboy Drew. Follow him on Twitter. Andrew, you and I, we haven't had a talk in a few days, at least not on camera. So UCF has been busy. They've been busy in the portal. Now, we talked a lot about the impact of replacing RJ Harvey, and they've gone out and they've gotten running back Jaden Nixon in the portal. Tell me how you feel about Jaden Nixon.
I mean, this is a good pickup. You know, this is a guy that has experience in the power conferences. He was Ollie Gordon's backup all the way until last year, 2023. He didn't play a whole lot for Oklahoma State, but he still had some work. And then he had a good run last year in 2024 at Western Michigan. So to come back to the Big 12, he knows the conference. I think this is a really good 1-year guy. You got youth coming in. You got Miles Montgomery holding over. So as you know, even with RJ Harvey, you still had a stable behind him, and UCF is working on building the stable. How it's going to exactly play out, who's going to be the number one guy, that's still up in the air. But at least you got a talented group of guys coming in or holding over that's going to really carry this running game going forward.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the idea of running back by committee and how look. RJ Harvey, amazing back, but you're not going to get one of those every year. So you're going to have multiple guys that can tote the rock. And it seems like UCF is trying to stack the box here to replace what was otherworldly production by RJ Harvey this past season. Obviously, he had one for the ages. As a matter of fact, we argued about whether he's the best running back in UCF history. Close. I'm giving Harvey the edge. But in light of his absence, UCF needs to find production at that position. Do you think that Scott Frost is done at running back, or do they have more work to do in that running back room?
I actually think they have a really talented group. Tavion Swint is coming in as a freshman. He's really, really talented. The guys holding over. You got Miles Montgomery, who has a lot of game experience with UCF. I think he comes into the spring as the presumed number one for now. But this Jaden Nixon pickup is a guy who can be the main guy to tote the rock. He did it. He had almost 1,000 yards last year for Western Michigan, 143 carries. He averaged over almost 6.5 yards a carry. That's pretty good. You break that 6 yard per carry average, you're in a good spot. So I don't think UCF really needs to hit the running back position all that much more based on what they got. You could see maybe another transfer trickle in, but I think the focus is going to be more on what you got. They still need to, maybe another wide receiver or two. They've been hitting the portal hard there, as you've talked about previously, bringing in players, but I don't think they're done there. And as you know, they've been working the offensive line really, really hard because that's an area that's been much maligned. So I think most of their work is done. They've got 22, 23 transfers already in. So they've done a really good job hitting the portal. They got a top 30 transfer class, according to 247 as of right now. Obviously, that can change. You never stop looking for ways to improve your program, but I don't think running back is really a dire need at this point. I think you got some good talent there.
Okay. So running back, not necessarily a dire need in Andrew Gluco's opinion. But look, production is going to be important here for the UCF Knights in Scott Frost's first year. So far, I think that this offseason is going to be about how well they evaluate talent. Now, you maybe don't have the cachet to go out and get those big names in the portal. But from what we know about Scott Frost, I think you can, at least to some extent, out-evaluate and out-develop your peers in the conference to kind of close that talent gap. What do you think about Scott Frost's ability to be able to identify hidden talent. I mean, talent gets overlooked every year. Is Jaden Nixon, one of those guys? You know what? Before I let you chime in on this, it killed me this year to see how many people wrote off the Boise running backs accomplishments this year because he was at Boise. Genty was a beast carrying the ball, and even though they came up short and they lost, I still saw a guy who was extremely talented ball carrier and should have a successful career at the next level. We see big time NFL running backs come out of kind of that like next level of programs all the time. So why can't Jaden Nixon be the next guy emerging from Western Michigan to UCF and have a chance to prove himself against the best in college football?
The NFL looks at different things in college. That's the truth. Kevin Smith often also was very under the radar at UCF. He had the big explosive year in 2007. He still didn't get much credit for what he did. He was largely ignored for awards at the end of the season, despite the fact that he also nearly broke Barry Sanders' single season record.
He did.
Just like Genty had a shot of doing the same. They both fell short, but still they're up there in the top 5 all time for a single season. That's nothing to scoff at. But what the NFL looks at is different than what makes a college player great. You can be athletically better than a lot of your college peers, but in the pros, you're not. And so you need to have something else, something better. Is it blocking ability? Is it that second gear in the open field? Is it the able to roll off a hit? Something. So what translates from one to the other, not necessarily the same. Ashton Genty, I think, is going to have a good pro career. I think he's built for it. In the case of Kevin Smith, he started to, but injuries, derailed his career. He was kind of run to the ground in 2007, setting an all-time single season record for number of carries. That'll ruin your longevity as a running back, because the shelf life is not there. It's just such a punishing position. But the other thing to look at is Scott Frost is looking for a certain type of player, and he flat out said, I'm going to work with what I got. But he's also going to be looking to develop players that fit the system he wants in place. So you're going to see freshmen largely in one bucket, and you're going to see these 1-year transfer rentals in another bucket. They're going to try to fit a certain mold for the youth, but the other guys, it's going to be, okay, we have this talent here. How can we best work with what we got, and then put these pieces in place to complement that? And this is going to be a challenge to his assistant coaches of making these pieces work. That's one reason why I think 6-6 is reasonable for this season. I think that's your floor. It should be your floor every year. If not, once you really set the stage to do better, you can set it higher. But a bowl game should always be the goal. That may be the best they can pull off with the talent that they have. That's kind of a bit of a mishmash, but those young guys, I think between year 2 and maybe even year 3, you're going to see, that cohesiveness based on the spread offense that he has run. And again, McKenzie Milton was not a highly recruited quarterback when Scott Frost was an offensive coordinator at Oregon.
Yep.
He looked at him, he saw him there. And then when he went to UCF, he found opportunity. Oh, this guy would be perfect for this system. They need quarterbacks. They don't have the recruiting power that an Oregon has. I'll take this flyer under the radar. And 2 years later, turned him into a star.
Yeah. Look, the ability to be able to identify and develop underrated talent, I think, is going to serve Scott Frost really well here in his first year as UCF's coach. But look, they're not done filling out their staff. You and I didn't get a chance to talk about the latest hires. They got one hire left. We're going to talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Andrew, the college football playoff is not over. And as I promised, I will mention that I would have loved to have had tickets to Oregon versus Ohio State to see them get beat and to see my bet pay off, because boy did it pay off, and Game Time could have had me there for a great price. Look, I love to attend games. I know you love to attend games. We're covering them, but if you want to attend a game, Game Time Picks has a new feature. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to events even easier. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. They've been hiring. They've been on a little bit of a hiring spree. Like I said, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it, but they did get their guy at running backs coach in Mr. Jimmy Beal. Brand new running backs coach. And they got Pete Alomar as special teams coordinator. So these two gentlemen joined Scott Frost's staff in year one to help him round out what he's doing there from a coaching standpoint. Before we move on to potential linebacker coaching candidates, your thoughts on these two hires?
Once again, UCF is really doing well. Scott Frost has done really well with these positional hires. Jimmy Beal coming from Utah State. Utah State has had good success with the running backs. Not a school that on the Eastern Coast may jump out to people, but hey, I remember UCF played Utah State and lost many years ago. So I'm just saying, this was a good pickup. Young guy, has an eye for talent, can develop. Can fly under the radar. Okay, that's kind of like the blue collar feel, the chip on the shoulder that UCF has always had. UCF has always actually thrived as a program that people count out. When they start being, get these high expectations, usually when they falter.
Yeah.
Now Pete Alomar had a lot of success at Stanford. I think this is a really interesting pickup. This is kind of like an elder statesman hire. He's been around a long time. He's older than most of the rest of the staff. So I don't know how many years he's got in the tank, but we saw what bad special teams can do for a program. UCF had some very bad special team gaffes that cost them games. The game against Arizona State was decided with bad special teams. If they made some smarter decisions, that game would have ended up a lot different. So I think this is a good hire too. It is good to get young, hungry coaches in there. A Brandon Harris, a Jimmy Beal. You do want experience on the there as well to kind of help. Keep expectations tempered. Be able to share their experiences and stuff like that. Because that youth and passion and energy is a double-edged sword. It can work for you. It can also work against you. So you need a blend of young and old. So I think this is kind of a good offset hire to kind of be an elder statesman for this staff. But as you said, the hiring's not done. They're looking at linebackers coaches. There's probably analysts out there that still haven't been hired. Nothing's official yet. There's been rumblings, but nothing official.
Yeah, linebacker is the only position left, I think, to hire as far as on-field coaching is concerned. Now, the NCAA has changed the rules about how many coaches you can have involved, from a certain standpoint. But rumored to be the lead for the job is Mark D'Onofrio. Am I saying that right?
D'Onofrio, yeah.
D'Onofrio. Former Stanford linebackers coach here. So I haven't heard a lot of names around this job except for his. And once if he gets hired, that'll be it for Scott Frost. And I think you turn your attention to getting organized for spring practice and for that spring game, which is going to be an exhibition of sorts to fans about, hey, what kind of team are we looking to field in the fall? So, and also getting that coaching staff set to hit the road when recruiting opens, and you can hit the road again and recruit. So this is I like this. This is a nice young staff. Before we move on, we've been grading these hires. I didn't get your grade after Beal and Alomar, but how are you feeling about the grade here of the coaching hires?
I give Beal a B plus. I think it's a good hire. A little lighter on the experience, but he's looking for young and hungry, and he kind of fits that bill. I give a solid A for the Alomar hire. Stanford, his time at Stanford did really well. He had some of the best special teams units in the Pac-12 at Stanford. He has a lot of experience, brings that to this young staff. I think it's a great offset hire. I think it's really good. And you take the whole, now we talked about this before, the overall grade, I'm borderline B plus on this. Let's see how that last hire goes, but I'm borderline on that B plus B line at this overall staff, because again, the coordinators, we'll see what they do, but these position coach hires have just been absolutely fantastic as a whole.
Agreed. I'm really close to a B plus myself. As we mentioned, you don't think there's anything that will push this to an A.
No.
But look,
short of Nick Saban being a consultant, no, which is not happening. Let's that's not happening.
Yeah, Nick Saban as an analyst would be the most epic thing ever, and that would definitely put it in an A. We're totally living in fantasy land with that. But UCF will not be living in fantasy land with high school recruiting here. They've got to get high school recruiting going. We're going to talk about what some reasonable goals there are for the 2026 cycle right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCS is brought to you by Wayfair. Andrew, after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. And I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a good New Year's routine. That's where our friends at Wayfair come in. Whether you're tidying up or clearing out, or you just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. Did you get any furniture for Christmas?
No. I got my daughter a beanbag chair. Does that count?
Yeah, listen, I think they've got those on Wayfair. So you're lucky. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's wayfair.com. This first recruiting cycle, I feel like, number one, has to have an asterisk by it, because when the coach comes in, it's always a tough prospect, especially with the early signing period, to ask him to bring in a dynamic class. Fair, yes, fair, right? So we're really going to be looking to next year's high school recruiting to see how they start to build. And I think that if you're Scott Frost and you have some proof of concept, top 15 in recruiting might not be out of the question, Andrew, for this staff. They just got to show something on the field. You're in the Big 12 now. Why can't they make again, I'm living in fantasy. I'm going to admit, because the listeners are going to be like, you're delusional. And I'm going to say, yes, I am delusional.
You're delusional.
If Arizona State can be picked to finish last in the Big 12 and make the college football playoff as the conference champion, why can't UCF aim for top 15 in college football and recruiting for the next recruiting cycle?
Well, they can aim for it, but they just won't hit it. And it deals with, it looks like an S with a line through it, and the lack of that. Here's the truth. UCF, their goal should be, the top half to maybe top third of the conference. So let's not top 15. Let's start somewhere more realistic. So UCF's high school recruiting, obviously for the 2025 class, was, kind of down in the dumps, but that's what coaching changes do. They're lucky that they were able to retain what they have. They've been hitting the portal hard. As a result, according to 247, they're currently 7th overall in the 2025 class. Because that was mostly based on their transfers. Their transfer ranking is, I believe, 30th. So, being in the top half of the conference, I mean, that's a good start. 2026, they should, top half of the conference. Let's do it again. The goal is to, work that way up, because especially with the freshmen, it's going to take time to develop. So, you don't have much of a 25 class. You're going to have to hit the portal hard this year and next year to make up for it. But by that third year, you're going to have a good core of players. Because remember, UCF lost a lot of players as a result of Gus Malzahn leaving the program.
Did.
You know, they had over 20 transfers out. It wasn't the top in the nation, but it was definitely up there. They did a great job replacing, but a lot of these guys are 1-year rentals. So they're going to have to do it again as they continue to cultivate the talent. You know, they want to follow the track of, like, say, an Ohio State, who most of their players aren't transfers. They grew most of their talent, most of that roster. There are a few exceptions, like a Will Howard or a Caleb Downs. But a lot of those guys, they're 3-year players. And that's what UCF really, if they can do it right, that's what they need to do with this coaching staff to really build a winner is, and this is something that Gus Malzahn failed to do. It was grow the talent. You know, there was a few exceptions. You know, RJ Harvey transferred in as a freshman before Gus ever got here. But most of the other guys they brought, that became stars were all transfers. They all came in later. They weren't grown.
There's an idea.
Has to do that.
Well, there's an idea that in today's era of the portal, you can do more of it through the portal than you can, through high school. And coaches are kind of split on this. Obviously, those watching know I cover Auburn. I've had conversations with Hugh Freeze where he feels like high school is if you want to compete with the Alabamas and the Georgias and those schools at the top, you need 3 to 4 strong high school recruiting classes. And then you've got coaches like Lane Kiffin who go to the portal for a majority of his talent almost every single year. They're not, you won't find them around the top 10 in recruiting. Yet they're in the conversation. They field a competitive team year in and year out under that coach. I think it's a balance of being able to recruit at a high level, but also evaluate and develop at a high level. And when you get a coach who's good at both, you get Nick Saban, right? A guy who can recruit and a guy who, can develop, because his kids were going on to the NFL as well too. But the two are not a given. And I would point to Texas A&M as an example. You remember when NIL broke and Texas A&M was rumored to have spent like $30 million on their high school class that year or something crazy. It was like the greatest.
And it was a dud.
Well, I don't know. I think the coach was a dud. He got fired.
And part of that was his class. He didn't get So I always use this as a comparison of good team versus good players.
Okay.
NCAA tournament a number of years ago, University of Florida played Manhattan College, and Florida had all these McDonald's All-Americans, and they lost because they had great players, but not a great team. They didn't play together. So, you can get all these great individual players, but if you don't have something that they fit into, it's not going to matter. And that's what happened with Texas A&M. They got all the players that money could buy, but they were all different and they didn't fit the same system.
I would argue that the system had more to do with the coach, and the system had more to do with those failures than the mismatch of the players. Again, they paid $76 million to get rid of that guy. Right. And so my point is that all the
you're working in the wrong job.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. All the talent in the world, Andrew, won't fix a bad system. You got to have at least a decent system. We've seen talent save coaches. I would argue that Saban wasn't the best game day coach, but he did develop at a high level, and he recruited so well that his talent filled the gap when they came ashore. It's why it felt like they were inevitably going to win every game during his time at Alabama, and why they always got the benefit of the doubt when it came to making the playoff. And they're not getting that with Kalen DeBoer, as we've seen. So if you're Scott Frost, you have to put UCF in a position where the perception of the program is, look, we're going to get the most out of our talent, right? So this first class may not be the greatest, but the guys that we get from the portal, the feeling at the end of the season by the alumni and the fan base and the people giving the money has to be, this coach got every drop out of the guys that we have. And if we give him more, he'll do even more. And I think that should be the goal with high school recruiting.
Well, not only that, but it's also your assistant coaches, which play a pivotal role, not only in game time coaching, but in recruiting. You have to have a good set of assistant coaches, and that's what Scott Frost has been busy at work filling out that staff. You talk about the success in Nick Saban. A lot of that had to do with his assistant coaches. I mean, we would joke and call it the Nick Saban coaching rehabilitation program, because all these like good coaches that lost their jobs there would go to him to get things back on track, because he knew how to manage a program, allowed them to kind of rebuild themselves. That's what every head coach should strive to be able to develop from a coaching standpoint. You want to be able to get people to want to come to your program from a coaching standpoint, and also build them up and make them successful. I know a lot of fans don't like when coaches get hired away. UCF's not a destination school. It's a stepping stone, just like 95% of other schools. So, it's not an insult. It just is. We're not we don't see many schools that hit that. UCF's not a Texas or Ohio State or Notre Dame. It's a young school. It doesn't have the same backing. So as a result, it's a stepping stone. Right. But that also should be taken as a major compliment. When you're a fan of a program that has a coach hired away, that means he's good, and you helped. You as a school helped develop this guy into something successful, and then you can bring in another coach and help develop him. So I think there's potential. Scott Frost, doesn't want to go anywhere at this time, other than in Orlando. So I think you could see this kind of trend starting. But let's not put the cart in front of the horse.
Yeah,
got to start with what's going on today. You got to build finish the coaching staff, build the roster. Okay, you've got this mishmash of players from an old system and what you want a new system. How do you mesh them to make a successful team, or even incrementally successful team in 2025?
Building the Scott Frost coaching tree. Can't wait to see how that turns out. Great conversation, my friend. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at StatBoyDrew. And you can catch my writings on The Last Word on college football, a part of The Last Word on Sports Family.
Thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.